Hello Year 12 Sociologists and welcome to another edition of CopthallSoc Explains. Today we are going to be covering functionalist perspectives on education. Now in order to get to that point we need to talk a little bit about what we mean by perspectives at all. We're going to start just with an overview of the idea of a theory or perspective. So it's anything which has a set of common themes or ideas. You might call political views like conservatism or communism or Marxism, perspectives or theories. The example we've got here is feminism, one which is going to be familiar to some of you, and over the course of your time as sociologists will become familiar to all of you. So feminists have an idea about the way society works, and that focuses on the idea that men often control women in a way which is detrimental to their experiences, their life chances, etc. And that because of the way they see the world, because of their perspective, that will then determine ways that they believe things should be run and changed. And that's common of all perspectives, the idea that our understanding of how the world works will lead to a certain way of believing how the world should be changed. We're going to focus today on functionalism. So functionalism is one of the key ideas in sociology. And it focuses on the idea that society is made up of a system of separate parts, in the same way that we might see the human body as being made up of a heart and a lungs, a pair of lungs, a brain, a spleen. I don't know what a spleen is, but I know it's part of the body. Then we could see that from a functionalist perspective, society is made up of separate parts too, an education system, a family, religion, a criminal justice system, and so on. The key point is that all of those different parts do their own separate jobs, which are vital, but together they create a whole which is more than the sum of those parts. In the human body, it's a person. In society, in the sociological sense, in a functional sense, it's a whole functioning society. Functionalists also base their ideas on the view, quite controversial, that there is value consensus. Now, broadly speaking, we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. We all pretty much want the same thing. Some of the other theories we're going to look at, notably the conflict theories such as Marxism and feminism, completely disagree with that. And lastly, functionalists tend to emphasize the positive. They tend to look for positive functions to see how they contribute to the smooth running of society. Consequently, critics would argue they often neglect some of the problems or dysfunctions. If you want to read a little more, there's a link there that you can find out a bit more about functionalism. We're going to move on to that from that today and just talk about some of the functions of the education system. Many of these will be things you are entirely familiar with. And as you can see from our list here, some of these are functions for individuals, some of these are functions for society. Some are very obvious. You go to school to learn stuff and to get qualifications. Some of them are a little more, need a little more thought, and those might be to do with the idea of passing on a certain set of values in society, providing a trained workforce, and possibly even engendering a sense of community and cohesion with the rest of society. What we're going to do is we're going to look at some specific functionalist views about how and why these are so important. So for functionalists, there are a few main points about education. Firstly, we can see they have this idea that it is meritocratic. What that means is that everybody should have an equal chance. Secondly, and absolutely vitally to the functionalist view, is that education is seen as a functional prerequisite. Very simply, that means society cannot exist without it. A number of functionalists have looked at societies around the world and found that they all have education in some form. Not necessarily schools, not necessarily like we have in the West, but some form of passing on ideas, values, skills, knowledge to future generations. So we're going to focus on four main functions of the education system: the transmission of cultural values, social control, economic training, and social selection. A bit hard to see that last one. Okay, transmission of cultural values. This is the idea that what education does is passes on values. For Emil Durkheim, without doubt the key functionalist thinker, he suggests that what education does is it gives us a sense of belonging. It makes us feel part of something more important than ourselves. In his terms, this strengthens either social cohesion or, as we see here, social solidarity. In particular, Durkheim picks out subjects like history, English, RE, as ways of making us feel part of something. If you think of the stories you learn in history, the idea is this makes you feel part of this long chain of events and therefore beholden to it and willing to sacrifice yourself for it. Durkheim argues that this is often reinforced in other areas as well, such as the family, religion, and the mass media too. If you want to read a little more, or see some examples rather, something like the national anthem of America, or indeed an individual song like Eaton's, and you can click on those links for examples, demonstrates these ideas of making us feel part of something. Durkheim, as you can see here, talked about the way in which the teacher's role is not really to give their own values, but to pass on the ideas of society. This is sometimes called the jug and mug theory, or the jug and mug idea. And here we see a reading from the Gettysburg Address, the kind of thing that in American schools students might be encouraged to learn or read, again about making them feel part of society and consequently willing to do things for society. Tucker Parsons, another functionalist, talks about the idea of education as secondary socialization. For him, the idea is that it teaches us the things we can't learn in the family. As you see from our little bridge here, the idea is that school provides a bridge that takes us from the things the family can teach us to those things we need to learn for society, to take part in society. Our parents love us for everything we do and tell us we're wonderful. Society doesn't treat us that way. It teaches us, education teaches us that we have to be judged on universal standards. And that's a very important part of being a functioning member of society. The second function we're going to look at is social control. This is about trying to make sure that people obey the rules, and for many students in school, this might be the one which is most familiar to you. School teaches us acceptable and unacceptable behaviour. We have achievement points, merits, whatever it might be, to reward us when we do the things which society teaches us are good. Turn up on time, work hard, be nice to others. Ultimately, this will lead us to be good citizens and hopefully will reduce things like crime rates. But of course also it teaches us what happens if we don't obey the rules, and we can see from our charming picture here that there are punishments here as well. Economic training is perhaps the most obvious of the roles that education plays. This is just the idea that schools create a trained labour force. We need people to do all the different jobs. We need doctors, we need teachers, we need web designers. And in order to get those jobs, school has to pass on that information to people. This became very important in the 1980s and 90s, remains so today, with the idea of vocationalism. That increasingly what we need to do is not just teach abstract skills, but we need to teach skills specific to the workforce. We need to have people who can go straight out into jobs and make the economy work. And the last of the roles, functions, is social selection. This is related to the previous role of economic training, but focuses on the idea that there are different jobs and we need people of different abilities to do them. Not everybody is going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Some people are going to need to be cleaning the streets or serving our coffee. And the social selection function is telling us that if we don't have a mechanism for putting people in those jobs, society is going to collapse. It would be equally disastrous to have a society where everybody was highly educated and wanted to be a lawyer, as it would to be one where everybody wanted to be stacking the shelves at Asda. Davis and Moore are the sociologists who talk about this in most detail, and they have suggested that it's specifically the examination process which sifts and sorts out students, as you move through the education system, the more exams you get, the higher up you will get into the socioeconomic system, the higher pay you will get, and this also ensures that we have a wide range of jobs. Schools act as a sifting or sorting system to make sure we have all the jobs we need in society. There are critiques of functionalism, as we alluded to at the start. Marxists and feminists tend to suggest that not everybody benefits equally. As we will go on to see in later lectures, Marxists argue that the education system is heavily weighted in favour of the middle classes. Feminists would argue that it doesn't always benefit women. And it's certainly the case that Marxists would argue beyond that, it actually forces people to accept a point of view, a system which doesn't benefit the whole of society. And if you want to read a further summary of some of the functionalist views, including some criticisms, here is another link for you. This concludes our lecture on functionalist educational perspectives. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you are able to make some tremendous notes from it. Thank you.